I was halfway through my salad when my sister leaned across the table, smiled like she was doing me a favor, and said, "You should probably leave. This dinner isn't really for you." Everyone heard it. No one said a word. 5 minutes later, as I stood in the parking lot trying not to cry, my phone buzzed. A $2,000 Venmo request. Memo, your portion. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just cruelty. It was planned. Stick with me. My name is Rachel Miller. I'm 29, and that night I went to a family dinner my older sister Lauren had insisted on hosting. She picked one of the most expensive restaurants in town. White tablecloths, tiny portions, prices that made my stomach tight before I even ordered. I almost didn't go. Money has been tight for me lately, and I told her that. She laughed it off and said, "Don't worry, it's covered. Just come. We need family time." From the moment I sat down, I felt wrong. Lauren was overly sweet, like she was acting. My parents, David and Carol, barely looked at me. The waiter poured wine I didn't ask for. Lauren ordered for the table without checking with me. I kept smiling, telling myself I was being sensitive. Halfway through the meal, that's when it happened. Lauren leaned in, her voice calm, almost polite, and told me to leave. Not quietly, not privately. Right there, in front of everyone. I felt my face burn. I waited for my parents to say something. Anything. They didn't. My dad stared at his plate. My mom avoided my eyes. I stood up, hands shaking, and walked out while people watched. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and tried to breathe. That's when my phone buzzed. The Venmo request popped up like a slap. $2,000. For food and drinks I barely touched. As I stared at the screen, something clicked. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't Lauren being rude in the moment. The restaurant. The silence. The timing. I wiped my tears and realized the truth. This dinner was never about family. It was a setup, and I was the target. When I looked back, the invitation itself never made sense. Lauren hadn't called me in months. We barely texted, and when we did, it was short and polite, like talking to a coworker you don't trust. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, she called me 3 times in one day. Her voice was bright, almost too bright. She said we needed a family reset. Her words, not mine. She talked about unity, about how we were all drifting apart, and how this dinner could fix things. I remember holding my phone and feeling uneasy. Lauren never cared about fixing things. She cared about control. I told her I wasn't sure I could come. I was honest and said money was tight. There was a pause on the line, just a second too long. Then she laughed and said, "Rachel, don't be dramatic. It's covered. Just show up." She said it fast, like she didn't want me to think about it. There were little things that should have warned me. When I asked which restaurant, she gave a vague answer at first. "Oh, you'll love it." When I asked about the time, she sounded rushed, like I was bothering her. Her warmth felt forced, like she was reading from a script. Still, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe my sister meant what she said. That's always been my weakness. Growing up, Lauren was the loud one, the favorite. I was the helper, the one who listened, the one who filled in the gaps. If something went wrong, I adjusted. If someone needed support, I gave it. I learned early that keeping the peace meant staying small. There were other times too. Times I helped her out when she needed money. Times I showed up when she didn't. Each time, I told myself it was family, that it would balance out someday. But it never did. I was useful, not valued. As I sat there remembering that phone call, the pieces started to line up. The rush. The promise that it was covered. The way she pushed so hard for me to come. It wasn't about healing old wounds. It was about putting me in my place. That dinner invitation wasn't kindness. It was a trap wrapped in a smile, and I walked into it because I wanted to believe things had changed. Lauren didn't start hating me that night at the restaurant. That feeling had been growing for years. Looking back, I can see it clearly now. We grew up in the same house, but we lived very different lives. Lauren was the golden child. She was loud, confident, and always knew how to get attention. My parents praised her for everything. Her wins were celebrated. Her mistakes were explained away. I was the quiet one, the dependable one. If something broke, I fixed it. If someone needed help, I showed up. My parents leaned on me in ways they never leaned on Lauren. When they were stressed, they called me. When bills piled up, they asked me for advice. Sometimes even for money. I learned early that love in our family came from being useful. Lauren noticed this, even if she never said it out loud. When she struggled, I was the one who stepped in. Years ago, She had a financial crisis she didn't want our parents to know about. She came to me late one night, crying, saying she was scared and embarrassed. I loaned her the money without a contract, without pressure. She promised she'd pay me back. She never did. When I gently brought it up later, she brushed it off and changed the subject. What really shifted things was when I started pulling away. I moved out. I built my own life. I stopped being available at all hours. I stopped fixing things that weren't my responsibility. For the first time, I chose myself. From the outside, it probably looked small. But to Lauren, it was unforgivable. She didn't hate me because I failed her. She hated me because I no longer needed her approval. I wasn't stuck in the family pattern anymore. I wasn't competing with her, and that made her feel exposed. My independence reminded her of her own mess. So the betrayal didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't about dinner or money or one bad moment. It was the result of years of quiet resentment. Lauren couldn't stand that I escaped the role she was comfortable with. And when people lose control over you, they don't always let go peacefully. Sometimes they wait, and they plan. When I got home that night, I didn't even take my coat off. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the Venmo request again. $2,000. At first, I thought there had to be a mistake. Maybe Lauren hit the wrong amount. Maybe the restaurant messed up. My hands were still shaking, but I opened the attached receipt. That's when my stomach dropped. The bill wasn't just high. It was ridiculous. There were multiple bottles of expensive wine listed, wines I never drank, dishes I didn't order, steaks I never touched, desserts that arrived after I had already left the table. I started adding things up slowly, line by line, and realized something awful. Almost nothing on that bill belonged to me. My name was printed right at the top. I stared at it for a long time, feeling that hot mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Lauren didn't just ask me to pay. She labeled the entire bill under my name, like I was the one hosting, like I had agreed to this. That's when I decided to call the restaurant. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe an apology or confusion. Instead, the manager sounded calm and very sure. She explained that the payment split had been arranged ahead of time. Not at the table. Not after. Before anyone even arrived. My sister had given clear instructions about how the bill would be handled and whose name would be attached to which portion. The manager even confirmed the request came directly from Lauren. I thanked her and hung up, my chest tight. That was the moment everything changed. This wasn't about dinner etiquette or a rude comment. It wasn't about money either. It was about control. Lauren planned this before I ever sat down. Before I took a bite of salad. Before she smiled and told me it was covered. The shock slowly drained out of me and left something colder behind. Clearer. I wiped my eyes, opened my laptop, and started saving screenshots. Texts. Calls. The receipt. I stopped feeling embarrassed and started feeling steady. If Lauren thought I would quietly take this, she was wrong. This wasn't a bill. It was a move. And I finally understood the game. The next morning, I called my parents and asked if we could talk. Not as a group. Not with Lauren. Just us. They agreed, and we met at their house later that day. I brought the receipt, my phone, and a knot in my chest that wouldn't go away. I needed them to see what had happened. I needed them to choose me just once. I laid everything out calmly. I showed them the bill. I explained the call with the restaurant. I told them how Lauren told me to leave and how small I felt walking out alone. When I finished, there was a long silence. My mom sighed. My dad rubbed his temples. Then my mom said, "Rachel, it's just money." My dad nodded and added, "You know how your sister is. It's easier if you just pay it and move on." Those words hit harder than anything Lauren did. Not because they were loud, but because they were familiar. I felt something inside me sink. This wasn't shock on their faces. It wasn't anger on my behalf. It was comfort. This was normal to them. I asked them why they didn't say anything at the restaurant. My mom said she didn't want to make a scene. My dad said family fights should stay private. Then they told me I should pay the bill to keep the peace. Because Lauren was already stressed and I was stronger than she was. That's when it clicked. I had always been the one expected to bend. To smooth things over. To absorb the cost so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. My feelings were always less urgent. My hurt was always manageable. I wasn't being protected. I was being used as a buffer. I sat there, holding the receipt, and realized this wasn't about $2,000. It was about a pattern that started when we were kids and never stopped. Lauren acted out. My parents excused her. I paid the price. I stood up and told them, quietly, that I wasn't paying the bill. Not now. Not ever. My mom looked shocked. My dad looked tired. For the first time, I didn't explain myself or apologize. I walked out knowing something had broken. But something else had finally formed. I was done being the sacrifice. After leaving my parents' house, I didn't call Lauren. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I went home and opened my laptop. If I was going to stand my ground, I needed facts, not feelings. I started with my phone. Old text messages. Missed calls. Voice notes I had never deleted. I searched Lauren's name and scrolled back years. That's when I saw the pattern clearly. There were messages where she asked for money, just for a week. Bank transfers with notes like loan and emergency. None of it had ever been paid back. I pulled up my bank statements and highlighted every transfer connected to her. It wasn't one or two times. It was many. Small amounts that added up quietly. Then I checked my email. Buried between newsletters and work messages was a confirmation from the restaurant. My name. My phone number. My email. I hadn't made that reservation. Lauren had used my details to secure the table and the deposit. She didn't just plan the dinner. She put it in my name so it would fall on me. My hands were steady as I took screenshots of everything. The bill. The reservation. The payment instructions. I labeled folders. Dates. Amounts. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was organizing. As I dug deeper, more things surfaced. A message from a cousin asking if I had loaned Lauren money again. A reminder notice from a payment app tied to her account. Pieces of a bigger picture. Lauren wasn't careless. She was comfortable. Comfortable pushing limits, because no one ever stopped her. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my parents. Not friends. I made one quiet appointment with a legal professional and brought everything with me. I didn't go in angry. I went in prepared. The advice was simple and clear. What Lauren did wasn't just cruel. It crossed lines. When I left that office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. This wasn't about getting even in a loud way. There would be no shouting, no public fight, no dramatic showdown. Lauren thought silence meant weakness. She forgot that silence can also mean planning. After gathering all the evidence, I decided it was time to take action. I called the restaurant and asked to formally dispute the charge. My voice was calm, but inside I felt a mix of nervousness and determination. I explained that the bill was never mine, showed proof of the reservation, and sent screenshots of all messages and bank transfers. I stayed factual, letting the documents speak louder than any emotion could. The restaurant manager listened carefully and promised to review everything. A few days later, I received a call. They had gone through all the receipts, emails, and notes. After seeing my documentation, they agreed the $2,000 charge had been wrongly assigned to me. Legally, they shifted responsibility back to Lauren. She would have to pay the bill herself. I felt a quiet relief, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. Then came the next part, the family. I didn't call them. I let Lauren find out on her own. Sure enough, she called me the next morning, her voice sharp and panicked. "Rachel, how did this happen?" "That's not fair," she shouted. I stayed calm and didn't argue. I didn't need to. The proof had done its job. She realized quickly that this wasn't something she could talk her way out of. When my parents learned what had happened, they couldn't ignore it either. My dad tried to justify her actions at first, but the documentation made it impossible. Even my mom looked uneasy, no longer able to dismiss the situation as just money. For the first time in years, Lauren was exposed. Her manipulation, her planning, and her cruelty were all visible. I felt a shift in the air. The family dynamic I had always accepted, Lauren in control, me absorbing the consequences, was changing. I wasn't the one bending anymore. I wasn't the quiet one who took responsibility for everything. The balance had begun to tip. It wasn't about humiliating Lauren. It wasn't about revenge in front of everyone. It was about fairness, about showing that planning and cruelty have consequences. For the first time, I felt that the power wasn't in her hands anymore. It was finally in mine. After the restaurant formally shifted the bill back to her, Lauren's calm mask disappeared. She called me that afternoon, her voice trembling with anger. "You've ruined everything, Rachel. Everyone's going to think I don't know, incompetent," she shouted. I didn't respond. I let her words hang in the air, because the louder she got, the more she revealed. Over the next few days, she kept trying to justify herself to everyone in the family. She sent long texts to my parents, blaming me for making a scene and destroying family plans. She tried to make it look like I was the villain, but the truth was too clear. Every text, every document I had pointed back to her. And as she lashed out, she started revealing things she hadn't meant to. Mentions of unpaid debts, half-finished projects, money she didn't manage properly. Each claim she made to excuse her behavior showed how unstable things really were. My parents finally had to face it. For years, they had excused her behavior, ignored her manipulations, and blamed me when problems arose. Now they could see, without a doubt, how deep her manipulation went. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. They were quiet when I was around, no longer dismissive, and I could feel the tension shift. I stayed calm through it all. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself aggressively. I didn't beg for understanding. I just listened quietly and let her unravel. Every angry word she spoke, every shaky explanation, was proof for everyone to see. The more she tried to spin the story, the more obvious it became that she had planned the $2,000 setup and had lied about everything else in the past. By the time she finally stopped, the room had changed. The power wasn't with her anymore. Her attempts at control had backfired. She had exposed herself fully, and I didn't need to do a thing. The revenge wasn't in confrontation or shouting. It was in letting her reveal the truth on her own. Quietly, carefully, I watched as the family finally saw Lauren for who she really was. And I stayed steady, calm, and unshaken. A few weeks later, my parents suggested we meet for dinner again. This time, it wasn't at a fancy restaurant. It was a small, casual place, nothing luxurious, nothing extravagant. Lauren's first words when we sat down were an attempt at charm, a smile, and a, "Let's just put this behind us, Rachel." She wanted reconciliation, wanted me to act like nothing had happened, like the $2,000 incident never took place. I took a deep breath and kept my voice calm. I didn't let her charm or her guilt trap me. I explained clearly that what happened at the last dinner crossed a line I wouldn't allow again. I told her I would not be responsible for any of her financial mistakes or schemes, and I would not let her manipulate me anymore. My words were steady, even as I felt the old anxiety trying to creep in. My parents looked surprised at first. My dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mom opened her mouth a few times, then stopped. I could see it in their eyes. They were finally understanding. For the first time, they weren't excusing Lauren. They weren't suggesting I keep the peace at my own expense. They were seeing the role they had played, how their silence and favoritism had allowed this to happen. Lauren's expression changed from confidence to confusion. She realized that her control was gone. No threats, no shouting, no pleading would pull me back into her orbit. I stayed calm, unshaken, and firm in my boundaries. I wasn't interested in arguing. I wasn't interested in punishing her publicly. I was only interested in protecting myself and making sure this pattern didn't repeat. By the end of the dinner, the air felt different. The power that Lauren had always held, the invisible hold over my choices, my money, my emotions, was gone. My parents were seeing the truth, and I was finally free from the constant pressure to sacrifice myself for their comfort. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but the change was clear. That dinner didn't fix everything. It didn't magically heal old wounds. But it did something more important. It set boundaries, created respect, and finally shifted the family dynamic in a way that couldn't be undone. I left the table lighter, stronger, and certain that I would never be used again. After everything settled, I spent a lot of time alone, thinking about what had happened. The betrayal, the setup, the public embarrassment, the $2,000 bill. It all weighed heavily on me at first. I kept replaying the restaurant, the Venmo request, Lauren's angry calls, and the way my parents had stayed silent. It hurt. It stung. But slowly, I realized something important. The cost of their betrayal was nothing compared to the freedom I finally felt. I didn't need to humiliate Lauren or prove anything to the world. I didn't need to yell or make a scene. The revenge I wanted wasn't about watching her squirm or making her pay in public. It was about detaching, stepping away from the people who had used me, and choosing myself for the first time in years. I didn't win in the way a story might expect. I won quietly, by reclaiming control over my life. There was no dramatic forgiveness either. I didn't call her to make peace. I didn't apologize for past mistakes, and I didn't wait for her to realize the truth. There was no explosive fight, no confrontation with my parents demanding recognition. I simply stepped back, set my boundaries, and refused to be pulled back into the old cycle of control and manipulation. That calm, quiet decision gave me more satisfaction than any confrontation ever could. I reflected on the lessons I had learned. I saw how often I had been the safety net for everyone else, how often I had bent and sacrificed my own feelings, my own needs, my own money. I realized that the real cost of this family pattern was my own peace. By finally walking away, I reclaimed that peace. I didn't owe anyone anything they tried to force on me, and I wouldn't let them use me again. Sitting alone, I felt lighter. I had faced the betrayal, collected the proof, and quietly corrected the wrong. The emotional freedom I gained was worth more than any money or recognition. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was simply free. The real revenge wasn't in making Lauren suffer. It was in never letting her, or anyone, use me again. I chose myself, and that was everything. This story shows the importance of setting boundaries and protecting yourself from manipulation, even within family. Always document financial transactions and keep records of agreements to prevent being taken advantage of. Learn to stand up calmly, know your rights, and prioritize your well-being. Self-respect is the strongest form of protection.